a very special tribute and film screening. The Edge of Paradise is happening this Saturday at the beautiful Castle Theater. Of course, there'll be a gathering in the Yokouchi Pavilion with music that's going to be very enjoyable from Ged, and he's going to do some of my favorite music from the 60s, I'm sure. And then the film screening at 7:30, and it's going to be running till about 9 o'clock, right? And
yeah, that's right, Cindy. Thank you.
Then you got the special tribute to Bob and some special guests coming. Emmy is coming over to do some tributes.
Yeah, Emmy will be there, and the MACC is putting a little tribute video together of all of the highlight reel of all of the videos that Bob has done for them. And then, of course, there'll be your tribute with Bob's voice recording and Todd Perkins' video as a tribute to Bob. It'll be wonderful.
I was very impressed. I guess you and Barbara Trecker work on a beautiful program. And I got a chance to look at it yesterday. And I was touched with the work and beautiful way it was done with pictures and everything, color pictures, and a history of some of Bob's work. And it's always interesting in these things that happen like this, how you start to hear from a lot of different people, how they were touched and affected or knew Bob. And I'm sure you, since you started to get this organized, have been also hearing different stories and reaching out to many people as well.
Yeah, well, a lot of people have been reaching out to us, and they've been very interested in the program and what the times are and who's going to be there. And we're going to have a lot of Bob's family coming from the mainland, and of course many of his friends. But what we've also learned recently is the word has gotten out among what I call the Taylor Camp alumni. And so there are several Taylor campers who live on Maui, and of course I contacted them and told them about it, and they're all coming. But then they went and contacted the whole Taylor Camp alumni. It's almost like an alumni association.
I can see that, and you know, it probably was further because there was the Facebook connection going on for years.
Yes. Yeah.
And of course, when you created the beautiful website that's interactive, a lot of people started checking that out. And it's amazing how Taylor Camp, and for those just tuning in who don't know what we're talking about, The Edge of Paradise is based on a story about Taylor Camp. Yeah. Named such because of Elizabeth Taylor's brother donating or allowing people to live. He didn't really donate.
He didn't donate anything. He just let him move on to his land.
Yeah, which was quite a nice piece of property.
One of the most incredible, beautiful places on the planet. Yeah. No, but it's astonishing. At the end of the road on the north shore of Kauai, on the beach, on basically an old Loei complex, right at the start of the Nepali Coast Trail and the Trail to Kauai.
Well,
it doesn't get better.
You've lived on Kauai for how many years?
Since the first time I went to Kauai was 1969, but I didn't move permanently till 72.
Oh, well, that's a long time.
I lived on Oahu. And then I worked I taught on Oahu for a couple of semesters. And
what did you teach?
English, creative writing, and photography. Oh. And then I worked in a studio in New York for a while.
Film studio?
No, it was a advertising and design studio. I did the studio photography. I was assistant studio photographer.
Well, the film was based around the book that you did, and the book was really an art piece. It's a coffee table book. Beautifully
done. Thank you.
Really
thank
quality done. So I guess
the book is done well.
Very well.
And it's been quite popular among academics too. So it's been collected by a lot of university libraries.
Really?
Yeah. How
nice.
Yeah. You know Michael Pollan, the very famous writer. He did Omnivore's Dilemma, and his most recent book was How to Change Your Mind on psychedelic mushrooms and other forms of psychedelics. And so he's a world and certainly nationally acclaimed author, and he's also a professor at Berkeley. And he's familiar with the book. They've used it in seminars, and he wrote a phenomenal review for the book. So the book is getting out there, as is the film. The film has been translated into German.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's on Spiegel TV. We've got a contract on Spiegel TV.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's out there, and the social media, or just media in general, not just social media, but also print media. We've had articles. It's not just about the book and the film. We've had articles in 6 different languages now. Europe, South America, Asia, and as far last I looked, I don't really keep up with it, but there have been over 20 million social media views and shares.
Really?
Yeah. So
That's
the thing is
amazing.
happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting because I posted that you're going to be having this event on Saturday, and I know a friend through the Grammys, and I've known her I met her at the Grammys about 10 years ago anyway. She's a wonderful lady, and she's a Grammy member and married to a Grammy winner, and she lives on the East Coast, and I was just talking to her because she's going to be involved in my new CD.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, well, I was there. I said, what do you mean you were there? She says, well, I was 16 years old, and I was there in the beginning of Taylor Camp, in the very beginning.
Amazing.
And
yeah.
I mean, there's no way I would have known that.
She's an alumni, you see?
She
You see
is.
that
She
this
plays
alumni
amazing.
association goes around the world.
She plays Native American flute and everything, and she said she just went back last year to Kauai for her anniversary, and she walked out there and went to that site to bring back memories, because she said she made a promise to the mountain that she would return one day.
Mount Makana.
And she went there, and there was a mother and baby monk seal laying on the beach. And she and her husband just laid on that beach, and she said it just brought back so many memories. So this is the kind of thing that you're seeing. I'm sure there's people that come out of the woodwork that, I mean, I never would have guessed she was there. She never mentioned any of that, in her
And the
background.
site hasn't changed at all
Really?
from that time, except the tree houses aren't there anymore. But the tree houses were, well, I'm not going to give away the plot of the film, but the tree houses are no longer there. But except for the lack of tree houses, it's same beach, same trees, same stream, same everything.
She said
and
there was
there's
a
almost
cave.
nobody.
You said there was a cave.
Oh, there's
that
a
used
wet cave.
A wet cave. She was telling me about that. I
and
didn't
the
know
blue
about that.
room. No,
Yeah, the
so
blue room.
the wet cave it's a huge cave with a little subterranean lake, and this was a place, kind of a spiritual gathering place for a lot of people on the North Shore, a lot of the locals. This was right across the road from Taylor Camp, right at the cliffs of Mount Makana, right into it was a cave that was right at the base of the cliffs, and it was a wonderful place to play music. So the Taylor campers would often go there and play music, and the acoustics were phenomenal. But another thing that was interesting about it is there was you could swim deep into this cave and dive under a ledge, and then swim underwater and pop up in what they called the blue room. So you would be in this it would appear to be a totally dark cave, but as your eyes adjusted, you would see light bouncing off the bottom of the lake, this shimmering blue color.
Yes.
And it was, so that's in the film.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
I didn't know about that.
And so here's an interesting. Now this is great for your local Maui listeners. The woman who tells the Blue Room story in the film lives on Maui.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she's an art teacher here, Marie Kalanya.
Amazing.
And so Marie is a Maui woman, lived here since the last days of Taylor Camp. Her daughter, who was conceived at Taylor Camp, also lives on Maui.
Wow.
Jeannie Kalanya. Jeannie is married to to Danny, who is the stage manager of the MACC.
Not.
And Jeannie plays her mother, reenacts her mother's swim into the blue
that
room.
beautiful swim.
Yes, that is that is Jeannie Kalanya reenacting her mother's swim when they were about so her mother did it when she was in her I think she was 20 years old, and Jeannie did it when she was 20 years old, and she resembles her mother quite a bit, so it was perfect.
Well, it's a very interesting chronicle of then and now, and times were different, but at the same time it's interesting seeing the differences of then and now. And again, if you're just tuning in, I'm talking to John Wehrheim, who with Bob Stone did this amazing movie we're going to have a chance to experience on Saturday. And it's going to be shown at 7:30 at the Castle Theater. You can get tickets by calling 242-SHOW or going to mauiarts.org. And it's going to be a very special experience because there really, there was the dawning of this energy. There was this Aquarius. There was the dream. There was there was a lot of energy of the 60s still present, and a lot of people left, and you cover this very well in the movie. They left, and some were Vietnam vets, and others left what was going on to escape here to the edge of paradise. And then you go on to what happened, and it's an interesting reflection on society and the changes of then and now. Yeah,
and the Vietnam War and the Vietnam vets at Taylor Camp play a big part in this story. Of course, that in the 60s and 70s, Vietnam played a big part in everyone's lives. Yeah. You didn't have to be young. It just, of course, it was, if you were a young man, it was a very immediate threat and or maybe opportunity to volunteer and serve your country. But it was a very, very different time, and the war in Vietnam was a huge part of the consciousness of the Taylor campers, not, of course, just the vets, but of the camp in general. And the stories of the vets, we have another really heart-wrenching story about another Maui local person, Calvin Kuamo'o.
I knew Calvin, yeah.
Yeah, I think everybody. He was a cameraman and producer. Yes. He also did Kanaka Cam, and he was at, I think for the last 10 years or so, maybe longer, he has covered just about every sporting event on Maui.
Now, he died last summer?
He died 3 weeks after Bob. He and Bob were very close friends. It was just kind of spooky the way they both suddenly died. Mm-hmm. And it was right after this film was completed. And Calvin regularly came over to Bob's studio while we were working on the film, and he also often brought food. We'd have lunch or dinner, and he was. But he plays a huge part in this film, in the Vietnam story, or not just the Vietnam story, but the underlying theme of the healing power of nature and the healing elements of the life at Taylor Camp, because as a ranger, as a paratrooper, Calvin was asked to do more than any man should be asked, because he was pure Hawaiian, and we now know that the Hawaiians are distant relatives and descendants of the people who originally hopped in their canoes from Taiwan and Southeast Asia. So Calvin resembled a tribe in the mountains of Bhutan called the Montagnards. The French, that was a French name for them. That wasn't actually their name. So Calvin was dropped. He parachuted behind enemy lines. And because he looked like a local, and the first instance of contact with the enemy, they would think he was just one of the local guys. Mm-hmm. And he would turn around and kill him. Wow. And this is something that,
it haunted him.
It haunted him his whole life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because he was not really being honest about who he was, and he was being trusted for that split second because they thought he was a local. Mm-hmm. and he felt very torn between his loyalty to his country and his service to his country and the deceit that he performed in duty to his country. And so he said that in the film, he said, I carry that wherever I go. Mm-hmm. And that it was only when he went to Taylor Camp and was accepted by the Taylor campers that he could actually begin to sleep at night again, that he could begin to heal from that. And I think Calvin's community service here on Maui, he's from Maui, and then I think he went to high school in Aiea. He had family on the Big Island. He spent a lot of time on the Big Island. But his main family, the family Kuleana was Maui. So he came back after the Taylor Camp days. He came back to Maui. And I think that his service to the community, especially the young people with sports, helped him a lot. Yeah, it helped him an awful lot.
Yeah. I mean, well, we have about 10 minutes, and I want to talk a little bit about your travels, because there was a beautiful film called Bhutan. And
Bhutan, Taking the Middle Path to Happiness.
A beautiful film. It showed at the Castle Theater as well.
Yeah.
And
that was with Dr. Tom Vendetti and Bob Stone. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the three of us produced that.
And you just went back to Bhutan. And again, I have never gone. I really, really want to go to Bhutan. And not a lot of people can. They limit the amount of people that can get into Bhutan. And it's an expensive visa.
Yeah.
And I think they charge by the time length you're there, the
by
day.
The day, yeah.
How much does usually the visas cost? Do you remember?
Yeah,
you didn't have to
it's
pay.
There's an off-season and on-season visa, and I think it's about 2.25 off-season, maybe $250, $275. Now, if you're a young, starving backpacker, especially if you got student loans, well, if you got a student loan, you're probably not backpacking anyway. But say $2.25, $250 a day is makes it impossible.
Yeah.
But if you consider what a upscale traveler would pay traveling in Asia with a translator, a guide, a driver, hotel, and all meals paid, I think $250 a day is a bargain.
Well, that doesn't include all that, does it?
It does.
Oh, I did not know that.
Oh, yes.
I thought that was just a fee to get in.
No, that's your day rate. Now, that doesn't, if you wanted to stay, that's a 3-star hotel. If you want to upgrade to one of the fancy, they don't have many fancy hotels in Bhutan. There's a few. An Aman, Puri, then you pay extra. But the hotels that you stay at for that money, I find very comfortable. But yeah, anyway, I've been working I was working in Bhutan from 1991 till about the time we finished the film, and I did a book on Bhutan.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. It is called Bhutan: Hidden Lands of Happiness. I'll have to send you one.
I definitely love to see it. Now,
yeah.
So that was the old regime, but there's the old king. There's the new king that took over now.
Yeah,
right?
most of the time that I've lived and worked in Bhutan, the fourth king reigned, and that's an interesting thing about the film that Tom and Bob and I did. That in the middle of, actually, it wasn't in the middle of the film. It was after our the main production units had left the country, and I was working as a hydropower engineer in Bhutan. So I had an apartment there. I had no visa problems. I was going in and out freely because of my engineering background and responsibilities. But after we thought we had most of the film in the can, the king abdicated. And it completely changed our story. And Tom and Bob sent me back to Bhutan, and okay, you've got to get this and you got to get that, and
and you got an interview with the new king.
Yeah. Oh, we've got great stuff with the new king. Wonderful stuff. Photographs of the new king, and I accompanied him on his sort of triumphant movable feast through the country, where he greeted all the people. It's really a touching part of the film. But the film changed, and that was really my crash course in filmmaking because I was the writer and still photographer on that. I wasn't a cameraman. I wasn't a producer. And I'll never forget, being in a hotel room with Bob and Tom at like midnight, and they're flying out the next day. And this was before the king abdicated. And we still had to pick up some shots. That we didn't have everything. There was weather and landslides and all sorts of problems why we couldn't keep to our schedule. Typical. And so I'll never forget this. So Bob and Tom are giving me this crash course in videography and giving me all this equipment and leaving it all in the country. Okay, you've got to finish the thing. And so I did the best I could, and it was okay. It was usable. But before I left, the king abdicated. And suddenly, our story had completely changed, and we didn't have the material, and the king abdicated, but the new king hadn't been crowned. There was all these, like I said, this movable feast, this procession through the country, meeting the people, the Constitution. It was a much better story, and it made it a better film. But that was my trial by fire as a filmmaker, and I have to thank Tom and Bob. I mean, thank you, Tom and Bob.
Wow,
yeah.
Amazing!
And we won
story.
2 Emmys with that film.
Yeah, it was beautifully done too. It was beautifully done. There was
Tom won the Emmys. Bob and I didn't show up. I think we were too poor to afford the plane ticket or something.
So you went back to Bhutan. Was it August?
I go to Bhutan almost every year.
Oh, okay.
Our daughter now does a yoga and meditation retreat. We sponsored a lot of all throughout from about I think 2004, 2005. Our family sponsored monks from the monastic body in Bhutan at the East-West Center in the University of Hawaii, and they lived with us. And that was while our daughter was, even though we live on Kauai, I had an office in Honolulu, and she went to Punahou. So she was there. We were in Manoa. We had a house in Manoa, and the monks lived with us. And so they were at the dinner table every night, all through our daughter's high school days. And so she had all these connections, and she became very interested in yoga and meditation. And so she's got these connections to monks in Bhutan that's given her a great opportunity to bring people to Bhutan to study yoga, to access wonderful places for meditation and teachings. So now I used to be the one working in Bhutan. Now I'm just sort of like the official photographer or tagging along with our daughter.
So she brings a tour group over? I mean, does she do?
Yeah, it's mostly it's mostly. It started out being mostly her. She's a yoga teacher, among other things, but it mostly started out that she was bringing her students, most of them from Kauai. That's where we live. To Bhutan, but now it's branched out, and she's got people from all over the world.
Oh, I'd love to go. I still have not gone, and I really do want to go. And I mean, of course, I watched the film, and I've been aware of Bhutan for a long time. But it is, in many ways, the place that a lot of people wish Tibet was now. I mean, you go to Tibet. I went with Tom to Tibet in 1997, and I was shocked that it was not at all like I pictured it at that time. It more looked like the Chinese influence.
A suburb of China,
yes, it did.
Beijing.
It did.
Well, Bhutan is not like that.
Yeah.
It's very traditional. It's beautiful. It's just it's a natural wonderland. They've got a serious a refugee problem there, though. A serious. They did have some problems with the Nepali. Well, let me back up and put it this way. Bhutan is a vacuum. It's got, I think last I checked, it had 18 or 19 people per square kilometer. India's got 900. Nepal has got 600. Bangladesh has got 1,200. And it's sitting in the middle. It's like this vacuum in the middle of this tremendous population pressure. So naturally, there are problems. But one of the, and it's been a difficult thing for both the Bhutanese, refugees, everyone involved in it. But it's sorting itself out. But what is really fascinating is wildlife refugees. Wild animals are pouring into Bhutan from all the surrounding countries because they can't live in the surrounding countries anymore. Very similar to the people, right? We're all natural beings. And so they've got Bengal tigers. These are tropical animals, Bengal tigers, who have adapted to alpine environments in 2 and 3 generations, who are now roaming the mountains of Bhutan above 12,000 feet.
Wow.
Bengal jungle tigers.
Wow.
Because they can't survive in India. They can't survive in Nepal. They can't survive in Bangladesh. The population pressures, the pollution, the loss of habitat is so great, where in Bhutan the habitat is increasing. It's remarkable.
It is remarkable, and it's such a really, truly, that is, again, a paradise. But there's
it's not. There is no. You know what is. So the lead into our film is a great quote from Marcel Proust: "The only true paradise is a paradise lost."
And there is something to that. Of course, we've seen that here on the islands, haven't we? You've seen it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we've all seen what happens when you have too many people and too much traffic, and everything is, unfortunately, really sadly overdone. You know, I mean, I see it on trails I've gone what used to be totally silent and private, and now it's completely insane and crazy. And so,
well, Bhutan is still a great place, but
I want to go. Would you recommend going with a group? Would that be the best thing to do? Going like with
well,
your
it depends
daughter
upon. I can't make recommendations for other people. You know what. I would say if you are interested in yoga, but I think you need some, not just an interest. You have to have some background in it. Otherwise, you'll be so sore the first day they'll leave you behind the hotel. But I mean, she will take consideration for people who are not as advanced as others and handle them. But if you don't have a somewhat of a yoga practice and a meditation practice, I don't think you should go with Miley. No.
Now, Kutera, do you know Kutera?
No.
Oh, she does trips, and she's friends with the Queen and or the ex-Queen. I guess you're not the Queen still.
Oh, we had a wonderful.
She's there right now, as a matter of fact, with the group. Yeah.
We had a wonderful audience. Actually, a little luncheon party with the fourth king's mom, the Queen grandma. Last time we were there.
Yeah, and so you were there and get to meet with them. What's it like going to meet with the royalty there? Are they just very?
There is a pretty strict protocol. You don't just drop in.
Yeah.
And but they are the Bhutanese, and sometimes I have a feeling that it's similar to the Hawaiians in some way. All of us have met Hawaiians who have just a natural nobility and ease to them. I mean, it's just part of their culture. It's part of their DNA. And the Bhutanese have the same thing. Now, if you go just across the border in India or Nepal, it's not like that. I mean, you just don't, there's just that pressure. I think that's the pressure of overpopulation. But they're very confident. They meet you eye to eye as equals. They have a wonderful sense of humor. They're very unself-conscious, and it's just a delight. Even though, of course, when you're meeting the Queen Mother, like I said, you don't just drop in. But and there is very strict protocol. But once you're at the party, it's very cool.
What kind of food do you eat in Bhutan?
You'll like it if you like hot chilies.
It's hot.
They like hot food there.
Is it vegetarian a lot or not?
Well, there's a big push, especially from the monastic body and the chief monks, to go vegetarian. Traditionally, Tibetans, Bhutanese are mostly Tibetan culture. The Tibetans couldn't be vegetarians because it's just too high elevation. But nowadays, with food imports and all that, it's they're moving a lot more towards vegetarianism. Not just for the Buddhist. Well, I guess they're both Buddhist precepts. One is nonviolence. Two is nonviolence to the earth, because it's more environmentally sound.
And so how far in advance would you recommend someone planning to take a trip to Bhutan?
Well, you've got to plan months in advance. It just doesn't happen. You can't
There's
hop
a
on
limited
plane.
amount of visas.
Yeah, and you've got to make all the arrangements ahead of time and get your visa squared away. And so I'd say you plan it for a couple of months.
I would have thought a year. So that's
Yeah.
I mean that's not bad. I mean I would have thought it would have been longer. Really, I'm surprised. Well,
it depends upon the time of year.
Yeah.
You couldn't go. You couldn't. It'd be very rare if you decided in say August or July that you wanted to take a trip in October because that's the peak season.
So
and it's probably full. It's just maybe they wouldn't have any more plane seats.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the most difficult and remote access airport in the world.
And the peak season is October through when?
October, November.
October,
Yeah,
November.
that's when the weather is just perfect.
And
But I love to go in the spring when the rhododendron are blooming and just when the rice is starting to sprout and all the orchids are going off. It's a very beautiful, colorful country.
I want to go.
Don't wait. In a lot of ways, like everywhere else, I don't think Bhutan is going to improve. In some ways it will, but the population's increasing.
Well, thank you, John, for coming in.
Well,
and we'll see you
Cindy.
at the screening of the movie this Saturday.
Yeah, we'll see you Saturday.
Yes, at the MACC. Get your tickets, folks. Call 242-SHOW.